we do have some positive feels because Dan Snyder is out. It is official. Josh Harris, the new owner of the Washington Commandos.
Nice, VAR. It happened finally.
$6.05 billion is the final price. Now, Dan Snyder made some money off this. Obviously, he bought the team for $800 million, but he was out $60 million because they did find, sexual harassment claims there. They did find that, he sort of held back $11 million in revenue. And so because of all that, he had to pay this $60 million fine on his way out the door. And Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, talked about the findings of the league and Dan Snyder leaving.
The findings speak for themselves. We had an obligation to release those publicly. We did. We shared those with the ownership today. Had a full discussion of that. The findings do speak for themselves, particularly with Ms. Johnson. That's inappropriate. It's the wrong, and it doesn't match our values. And so, again, her findings were clear, and her findings.
Yeah. So it seemed like a lot of findings there from Roger Goodell when it came.
I wonder if they're going to release the report. Like you released it to the owner. You didn't release. Yeah, it can't be, right? It can't be any chance that it gets released.
That won't see the light of day.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, they released just the findings, but not the full report, from my understanding, correct? Just what they decided to find him yesterday for the sexual harassment claims. Yeah, and so the other stuff's probably not going to make it out.
They unanimously voted him out. Those findings pissed every last one of them, those owners off. Every last one.
He held back, what, $11 million in revenue from sharing with the other owners?
Yep.
I mean,
and people getting upset with me because I told them that he ain't put my bonus in the contract. That's so crazy. Now y'all learning. Y'all learning now, though.
Yeah. Well, I said this when we were kind of in our notes and talking about, but he's got to be the worst owner in professional sports history. I don't know that I actually created a list for you guys because I don't know that it's particularly close. But if you really look at it, he took over a team, and we talked about this with Albert Breer yesterday, and LaVar, I know you know this. It's probably a little different for Jonas and I, but they were so well regarded in the D.C. area, and even as an NFL franchise, like a storied franchise, he immediately came in, fired Charlie Casserly, who's beloved in some circles, really well respected. He hired his golfing buddy, Vinny Serrato. He ends up firing Vinny Serrato when he finally brought in Marty Schottenheimer. But then once Marty Schottenheimer was out, he just hired back Vinny Serrato with Steve Spurrier. And it was a perpetual cycle of poor decisions, putting people who probably weren't qualified to be in the position that they were in, hiring buddies, things of that nature. And that doesn't even include the tremendous workplace environment that he had created that was toxic and everything else. But other potential owners that I put in this category next to Dan Snyder is James Dolan, at least in regards to the New York Knicks. I don't believe any of the franchises that he's now the primary manager over in what I believe to be the MSG, the Madison Square Garden group of properties, which encompasses the Rangers, Knicks, and Liberty, which is the WNBA team. None of those have won a championship. The only one that has the AHL team has won a championship. And that was back, maybe a couple decades ago now. And think about it. Did he ban Charles Oakley?
Yeah.
From Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, I mean.
Or kicked him out.
He kicked him out of the arena, had him escorted.
Or kicked him out, whatever it was. Like James Dolan's got to be up there.
Okay,
Jeffrey Loya.
Can we present this in the proper manner? If you're going to break down the all-time worst owners, all right, we need some music here. All right, so Brady Quinn, take it away, please.
All right, so again, I'm going back to Dan Snyder being number one in professional sports history.
Far and away.
I dare anyone to challenge me. By far, there's a gap. There's a gap before you get to me.
His
James
talent
Dolan,
of horribleness
not only
is elite.
Well, it's elite in the aspect of really what the franchise was and then what it became. It's got a sub 500 win-loss record over the course of his tenure there. But that doesn't include the sexual harassment, all these other things, these allegations and things that were brought forth that were found to be true, the lack of revenue share, whatever you want to point to, Dan Snyder takes the cake at number one. James Dolan's there at two, and it is in large part because of the lack of success of any of the franchises that he's overseen, whether it's the Knicks, the Rangers, the Liberty, as I pointed out, amongst other things, and finding a way to constantly be hated by a lot of New York fans. Jeffrey Loria comes to mind. He basically won a World Series and then he somehow ran Jim Leland out of town. And then ever since that point, the second they actually saw talent in any of their young prospects, they trade them off for future aspects. Like, they tried their best to field the cheapest team and be as average as possible for the entirety of his tenure there, just so they could make money off this, which I guess is his own prerogative. Terrible ownership there. Although he was in competition with Donald Sterling.
Ooh.
Donald Sterling, the former owner of the LA Clippers.
I was wondering when his name
another guy who falls in the category of awful ownership. Nothing really occurred during his tenure there with the Clippers. And on top of that, racial discrimination, amongst other things. I mean, he was right there up there in regards to Daniel Snyder and how poor of a work environment he had created. And coming in at number 5, and it's a short tenure, but I think I've got Antonio Brown up there.
All right.
For the Albany Empire.
Congratulations.
Booming wasn't booming.
Yeah.
He currently still owns the team. The team was kicked out of the National Arena League earlier this year. There was accusations of skipping payments. At one point, he had to suit up, become a owner/player, I think, in order to get some attention, maybe to help things out. But in the short span, he's up there with some of the others in as far as the poorest ownership history of professional sports.
Now let me. It's not really, Antonio. That's the problem. Now here's the follow-up question I have for you. At what point, if you were going to expand this list, how far away was Jimmy Haslam from potentially making this list?
He wasn't even close.
Really?
I mean, I honestly, like, outside of the – because here's the thing is, it's not like before his tenure there was a tremendous amount of success.
That's fair.
So there's that element to things. He has, under his tenure, gotten to the playoffs, and they won a playoff game, in particular going to Pittsburgh, beating Pittsburgh. So I didn't actually have them anywhere close. And, in fact, I think they're going to be pretty damn good this year. So I would say he's done a lot to try to make things work in Cleveland. It hasn't worked out so far, but they could be turning a corner now.
I mean, dark horse candidate also Bidwell with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, do you believe
he would be up there? But again, like, you're talking about a franchise that has made it to a Super Bowl, at least in recent history. As even though they've had their poor stretch of runs now, they were a 10-win team 2 years ago.
Yeah, and
they have shown promise. I mean, during Kurt Warner's time there, Carson Palmer's time there. There were some periods of really competitive, good football teams.
Yeah, it's I do wonder though, was part of the agreement to walk away, the $60 million fine, all of that? Because LaVar, you've talked about, for right or wrong, Dan Snyder's a really competitive guy, like a really competitive guy. I do wonder if this is the last we're going to hear from him, or is he going to do some tell-all book about all the dirt he's got on other NFL owners and Roger Goodell? I wonder if that ever comes out.
I would think that this would be the end of it,
right?
Just based upon the multitudes of people who complained. It's not just that one lady in the report. There's more, and so I think that the best case scenario is to break free away from the NFL, and I think that I'm pretty certain that was what was being reported. The holdup was he didn't want anything kind of following him after he was done with the deal, like nothing that the NFL could come back and be like, okay, now we're going to continue to investigate this. We're going to do this X, Y, and Z. So I'm assuming that $60 million fine closes up shop on anything that the NFL will do in terms of going after him after the sale has been finalized. I don't see him burning or doing anything that would burn the NFL because I just think that the whole reason why he has to go in the first place is there's just too much there. There's just too much there, and it's damning on him. Now, it may be damning on other people as well, but I can guarantee you the most damning aspects of all the things that could possibly come out are on him.
Yeah.
So I don't foresee him being one of those type of guys that ends up being an issue later on, which, by the way, with that type of a deal, as big as that deal is, I'm certain the things he's done to people through the years with the whole NDAs and can't talk about the organization and this, that, and the other and whoop-de-woo, I can guarantee you the NFL did that to him before they approved this sale. I would assume that they made sure that the paperwork on him having a gag order over him not being able to talk, I'm certain that they probably agreed on that, and on both sides. I would assume
it does open up the potential return of one LaVar Arrington to RFK Stadium.
Yeah.
So,
is RFK where they're building the new one?
I think so. I think that was
Is that what you just made up?
No, that's what I saw. Okay. That's where they're building it.
You saw that somewhere?
The site of RFK Stadium, which I still call it RFK Stadium. Yeah. I refuse to call it FedEx. I'm just not going to call it FedEx Field.
Well, FedEx is a different stadium than RFK.
Yeah, right. But I grew up on RFK Stadium. I'm going to go with that. That was the glory days.
The bouncing, the rocking.
Why don't you call them by what their team name was back then? If it was the glory days,
I'm not allowed to. LaVar is because he was drafted by him, but I'm not allowed to.
Yeah, don't put me out.
So
there.
what do you call them now, Jonas?
The Commandos.
There you go.
Can they change their
name?
name?
So you're going to keep calling them the Commandos, even though little Danny's gotten rid of them?
Well, yeah, you have to.
I'm gonna call them Commanders now. I'm
you are.
Put some respect on it.
All right, that's nice of you to do that. I'm still going to call them the Commandos.
They weren't very respectable, before this.
The name sucks. Can we just say that? Let's call it what it is. The name stinks. It's not any good. And the fact that was what they came to, they should have just stayed with Washington Football Team. At least it was unique.
Yeah. I liked Washington Football Team personally.
I did too. There was no need to change.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. But, he tried to do whatever he could to hold on to that team. And he was fighting, kicking, and screaming to change from the previous name to the Washington Football Team. He did everything he could to not have to change that.
He told them people over his dead body.
Dude, I told you.
He'll die first before he changes that.
I called a game, and we were in Arizona, and I remember in the suite that he was in, he had a chief of a certain tribe up there with him.
No, he didn't.
I swear.
Oh, yes, he did.
He did. And I remember we were talking about it because that was back in 2014, 15. And I remember calling the game, and our play-by-play at the time had to comment on it. And I remember thinking to myself, so he's basically doing this to send the message that there are certain groups that are okay with
they're cool with this.
They're cool with this. He was trying to basically send that message. And I was like, this is and I was just getting the broadcasting, and I've always taken the position that when you're a color analyst, that is not for you to chime in on. That's the last thing you want to do is mention anything that's political in any way. And so I was just yep, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to, call the game.
So he basically,
it was so awkward.
He brought a Native American and used him as a prop to defend himself against the claims that the name was racist. That's unbelievable.
They were playing in Arizona at the time. They're in a suite together, and I think that was in essence what he was looking at trying to do. At least that was my interpretation of it. But again, I just was yep, not going to touch this.
Steer clear of that.